Hello, and welcome to Second Best University, a reading companion podcast for Dungeons & Dragons. I'm Steven, and I'll be your book club buddy. Let's get into it. Wowzers kablousers. Another fortnight spinning around on this crazy planet. Another opportunity to read a little chunk of the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition basic rules and learn a little more about this game we call Dungeons & Dragons. I wanted to say that we call it life, but we do call it Dungeons & Dragons. I am going to get right to the reading this time, but I want to take a second to answer a question from a very close fan. If you don't follow us on Twitter, you probably didn't see this question. Do follow us on Twitter. We're at SecondBestU, and keep emailing me questions. Keep tweeting questions at me. I might be a little behind on email questions, and if so, my bad. I am sorry. I will get to your question ASAP. But for now, let's get to this listener question. A very dear listener who's been listening, honestly, since before the podcast began. Second Best Podcast asked a question that we'd like to address. The question is, and I'm quoting here, do big boys get advantage if mommy is flanking? Now, I wish I had $1 for every time somebody asked me this question. I mean, if this doesn't come up at every table, then it's not Dungeons & Dragons. Do big boys get advantage if mommy is flanking? I tripped over flanking a lot in this most recent episode, mostly because I completely forgot how the heck it works in 5th edition, and I have too many stupid rules scrambled in my brain. Most of them are very old, and I didn't read them very closely, unlike now. But flanking, how it actually works in 5th edition is, first of all, it's totally optional. So what I should have said is, get the heck out of here. No. But I didn't. Let's say you're using flanking. I actually think it's a cool optional rule. It's a good way to make players get advantage and think about positioning. But if you are using flanking, then here's all it is. If two characters are both adjacent to the same character and on opposite sides of it, so that you could draw a line from character A to character B, and it would go through character C, like through the middle of their square, then A and B are flanking C. And A and B get advantage on attack rolls against C. So, does a big boy get advantage if mommy is flanking? Yes. If mommy is flanking and the big boy is the other part of the flank, then yes, they do get advantage. Thank you so much, Second Best Podcast. Give them a follow. They're trying really hard to catch up with Second Best EU. And I think they're, honestly, as kids go, they're great kids. They're doing great work out there. And do listen to the last episode of Second Best if you didn't hear that, because it takes up a chunk of time, honestly. But enough about Second Best. Let's get to reading the rules. If you're just tuning in, we've been reading the basic rules. We've already read the introduction, Chapter 7, and Chapter 9. Chapter 7 was using ability scores. Chapter 9 was combat. And if you're one of those people who's been like, Steven, I get it. We're skipping around so that we can read the rules in the order that the rules make sense. But also, I love numbers and the order they were put in. Well, I have good news. This week, we're going to be reading Chapter 10, Spellcasting. That's right. We're going to be reading pages 82 to 85 in the basic rules. 85 is the last page that I told you to print out if you printed them. After that, it's basically all lists of spells. So we are reading pages 82 through 85 and talking about them today. I will also tell you that it's pretty cool to check out page 81. Lots of very fun art there. So if you want to read that, go ahead and read that. And if you don't want to read that, then go ahead and listen to this sweet music, and we will be back at the... Does this keep happening to you? Are you recording your podcast where you have to say a time that a thing will happen, and then you realize in the editing process that the time changes as you edit the thing, so you keep making the time wrong, and it's very hard? Well, I'm Post-Production Steve, and I'm here to tell you your problems are solved. You can just fix it in post. We will be back at the 5-minute and 40-second mark. I really hope. At this point, I'm just vamping to get us to a point where that'll be true. All right, see you later. Welcome back. Chapter 10. Spellcasting. Wizardry. Sorcery. Clericy. All of the fun rules. Spellcasting is basically all of the cool rules. It's still rules. They're still very clearly defined. But it's when they get to undo the top button, they kick their shoes off, they get out on the dance floor, and they let loose, you know? It's when the rules finally get to be themselves and stop with all of these things, these fiddly little bits. For the most part, that's the actual spells. There are some general rules about spellcasting that we're going to talk about now. Now, some of the rules about spellcasting are class-specific. In fact, like a bunch of them. So that's why this chapter is so short. There are a lot of little things that differ between the different spellcasting classes, and even sometimes between like different subclasses of classes, and we'll get into all of that when we talk about the actual classes themselves. But this time, we're going to talk about things that apply to all spells, and all spellcasters, and all spellcasting, and just give you a rundown of magic in the structure of Dungeons & Dragons. To begin with, here's the big division. There are basically two types of spell. There are cantrips, and there are leveled spells, or level spells. Spells that have a level. Now, sometimes in the rules, for those of you that read, you're probably like, what? They didn't say this in the rules. But trust me, this is super valuable. It comes up occasionally. And when it does, they're really treated as these two different classes of spell. So, cantrips are technically level 0 spells, but throw that out, forget about that. If a spell needs to know the level of another spell, then a cantrip is 0. But that's just a way of saying they don't have levels. Level spells are spells that are level 1 through level 9. Cantrips are spells and their magic the way that you think of magic from other settings. If you know the cantrip, then you always have it. You can always use it. It's just something you know. It's like being able to throw a ball or run or something like it's just in you. You can do it. Level spells have a cost, and the cost is their level. Steven, what are you talking about? So, level spells have a spell level. For instance, level 1 spell, level 2 spell, level 3 spell. Those spells, you need to exert some effort to cast them, and that effort is codified as spell slots. And spell slots also have levels, like level 1 spell slot, level 2 spell slot, level 3 spell slot. And at any given moment, you're only going to have some of each level. Like, you're only going to have 3 first-level spell slots, or 4 8th-level spell slots, or whatever you have. Spell slots are how you pay for level spells. If you want to cast a level 1 spell, you need to exert a level 1 spell slot or greater. You can always use a slot of a higher level. It's basically like clothes, kind of. Like, if you're a size medium, like me, then yeah, you can wear a medium-sized shirt. And if somebody's like, but I only have a large shirt, no big deal. I can wear a large shirt. I can wear an extra large shirt. I can keep going up all day. But like, it doesn't help me if somebody's like, well, I have 2 small shirts. It's like, well, what am I supposed to do with that? You can't use 3 level 1 spell slots to cast a level 3 spell, because it's just the shirts don't fit. So, level spells are different from cantrips. I hope some of that made sense. Level spells are different from cantrips because they have a cost. The cost is their level, and every spellcaster will have spell slots of various levels that they can use to cast those spells, and they will regain over long rests or in some class-specific way. So, all this talk about types of spells and levels and stuff, what is a spell? What makes a spell a spell? All spells share some characteristics. All spells have an effect. Dispel, the reason you're doing it. They have some sort of effect on the world, and that part is what I meant when I said the rules can let their hair down. That's the expression I was looking for. They can let their hair down because in the spell effect, anything can happen. You can write any words you want in there. I get a pineapple milkshake. Boom. That can be a spell, as long as I give it all the other attributes that spells have, which I'm about to list and talk about. So spells all have casting times. A casting time is the amount of time it takes for you to cast the spell. That makes sense, right? The default is an action, so you can do it during combat. But some spells are a little faster, and you can cast them with a bonus action, and some spells are really fast, and you can cast them with your reaction. That's fairly rare. But this is an easy way. We talked about action economy last time. If you're a spellcaster and you're looking to get more out of your action economy, keep an eye out for spells that you can use a bonus action to cast, or spells that you can use a bonus action to continue to control. I'm going to, again, throw out Spiritual Weapon. I love it. Or you can use your reaction on. Shield is a big one. Other casting times are actual times. Some spells take minutes or even hours to cast. I don't know if there's spells that take days, but there are spells that take a long time to cast. It can be anything that's a real time. Casting time is not to be confused with duration. Duration is how long a spell lasts after you cast it. Now, a lot of spells have an instantaneous duration, but that doesn't mean they go away as soon as they're done. So Earth Eruption is a level 3 spell that has an instantaneous duration. The second you cast it, the earth where you cast it just shoots up into the air like it's been shot out of the ground and it's making some sort of fissure or chasm or something. But even though the spell happens instantly, once the spell is over, the effects persist. The ground is still churned up. There's still a big hole where the earth shot up. The world is still changed by the spell, but the spell isn't ongoing. So some spells have super long durations. My personal favorites, there's a whole category of spells that they never really call out in the rules, but if you read through spells, you'll see this once in a while. There are spells that are permanent if you cast them every day for a year. In the most recent, not the most recent episode, but a couple episodes ago in Second Best, they came across a mist that was a Guards and Walls spell, is I think what it's called. And Guards and Walls is one of the spells where if you cast it every day for a year, it stays permanently, which is what the Saddam Seb had done. So that is pretty cool. I love those spells. They're so useful for setting up environments and giving a little flair. It's very cool. There's also one around the Dragon's Den. I really, really love these. I use them all the time. So, another duration that we gotta talk about is concentration. Some spells last as long as you can concentrate on them, which I'm sure you're like, Steven, no problem. I'll tell my character to concentrate on them and then I will peace out. But no, concentration has a couple of rules, like rulesy rules that you need to follow. So if you cast a spell with concentration, you can only concentrate on one spell at a time. So you cannot cast another spell with a duration of concentration while you're concentrating on one spell. Big deal. Also, if you take damage, then obviously, if you're concentrating on a book or a test or something, and somebody, or maybe, I don't know, a really freaking good rules podcast, then somebody stabs you in the arm. If you're listening to my podcast and someone stabs you in the arm and you're really concentrating on this podcast, you're trying to hear every word, you gotta keep focusing so hard on this podcast to stay concentrated. What I'm trying to say is, if you take damage while casting a spell with a concentration duration, you have to make a Constitution save with a DC of 10 or half of the damage you took, whichever is higher. So it's usually 10 for simple attacks, unless you're fighting a super cool boss and they deal 26 damage and then it's 13 con save. As you get higher level, this will happen more and more, so keep in mind the half damage part of it. And I can't believe I have to say this, but it is written in the concentration rules. You can't concentrate if you're dead or unconscious, which is just kind of basics of what concentration means. But if you're casting a spell that has a concentration duration and you die, that spell's over. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. You're not concentrating anymore. The next attribute all spells have is range. All spells happen over some sort of distance. Most ranges are distances that are covered in feet. Sorry, everyone outside of America. But there are also other ranges. One range that a spell can have is self. Self is obviously the spell happens to you. Bada bing, bada boom. So their range is just you. You can also have spells with a range of touch, which is you need to be touching whoever or whatever you want to cast the spell on. That can also be yourself. You are always considered touching yourself, so you don't have to do any sort of weird hand on the face thing or something, although it can be fun to say that. I like that you can touch yourself in the rules of D&D, and they had to clarify that. I don't heal anybody else. When I cast cure wounds, I touch myself. Whoa. That's what a joke would sound like. Great. One more quick note about range. The spell is not limited by its range. By which I mean, like, the range is the range that the spell can be cast at, but once it's out there, the spell's effects can spread. So if you cast a fire spell, like Fireball, the range of it will be, oh my god, I should know this, like a 30-foot sphere, I think, or a 15 radius sphere, something like that. But the range is where it starts. If you cast that in a forest, then the fire from the fireball could spread throughout the forest. So the range is not the range of the effects of the spell, it's just the range of the original point of the spell. The next thing that spells can have, the next attribute that spells can have, is a target. Now, not every spell is going to have a target. Some of them, or especially spells that target self, it's like going to be you. But if they have a target, like a point in space or another character, then you've got to be able to see where or what you're targeting, unless the spell says otherwise. You can't cast into total cover. Recently, in a game I'm playing, I came up against this because a bunch of my companions were up a cliff face, and I was on the bottom of the cliff face, and I tried to cast over the cliff face, but I couldn't see. I knew what was up there because they knew what was up there, but I couldn't see over the cliff edge. So that's a little fiddly bit that you can have fun with. And the last attribute that I'm going to talk about is components. Spell components. I have got to be honest, I have never once followed the rules for these, and I have always won at D&D by having a fun time and telling a memorable story. So take this section with a grain of salt. There are 3 types of component in Dungeons & Dragons. There are verbal, somatic, and material components. Ooh, somatic. What a fancy word. I love it. Somatic. Somatic, guess it. Anyway, verbal, let's just go through them. Verbal is a type that just means, so if a spell has a verbal component, that means that you need to be able to speak to cast it. This one can be important because one way to counter spells, especially early in the game, is to cast silence. Of course, real pros, like the players in second best, use silence to shank tour guides, but you can use it to lock down casters. Literally, this exists to open up other ways to counter spells than counter spells. So that's why if a spell has a verbal component and you're in a big silent sphere, then you can't use that spell. Somatic spells have a somatic being of the body. For you non-Latin scholars out there, hey, Latin scholars, how you doing? You already knew. Somatic means you've got to have a hand free to cast a spell with a somatic component. This is a way to balance battle casting. So, like, if you need to have a hand free to cast somatic spells, you can't have a sword and a shield and somatic spells. Something's got to give. So you've got to choose. Or you can play the fun way and have it all. This does feel mean to the rule book I'm telling you all to read, but it is true. It's pretty much, I mean, you know, if you write to me saying, hey, somebody in second best, like Yolanda cast this somatic spell and then used her hands to do something, I will be like, she sure did. I'm sorry. Now, material components. Material components are probably the most important one. Many spells require material components, and sometimes these are really important. There are 2 ways the material components can be important. If they're consumed on use, then the spell is very powerful, and D&D doesn't want you running it around using it willy-nilly. Hello, True Resurrection. Thinking of you. Like, a True Resurrection, it costs 25,000 gold pieces worth of diamonds to cast every time you cast it. So that's like a huge cost. The purpose of it narratively is to say, don't just go around trying to True Resurrect everybody. And the second reason that material components are valuable and important is because sometimes they're kind of funny. Like sleep requires a little sand, like the Sandman, and detect thoughts requires a copper piece, which is a nod to the phrase, a penny for your thoughts. So you can't get rid of that. That's very important to keep in your game. Truly, my real opinion, I've been joking around about components, trust the story as to whether or not any of these things are important. Like, think about a story and how it would develop with anything in your D&D game, but especially with components. If someone sits down at the table and is constantly talking about their busted battlecaster and they're going to win every fight and they're going to win this game and they broke this system and they're so smart, yes, please enforce somatic rules so that everyone can stop listening to this person talk about their character and play the game. If a player casts silence around a lizard man caster, like, read the story, read the room, and make that caster abide by the verbal rules, because it makes your player's decision make sense. Don't then be like, oh, we don't play by verbal rules at this table. Like, cool, then why did you let me take silence? It's now useless. So, understand that kind of thing. And if you want materials to be important to a spell, make them important to the story. In second best, I've used a spell that required a rock or another object to house a memory in. It came up again in this last episode. And that makes the spell feel cool. It makes it have a physical presence in the world. I've also made a variant of the wish spell that requires some different objects that now are very big story-wise. You may have heard of them. Don't listen to the players about what they are. I'm right about what they are. But anyways, the point is, have fun with why a spell is hard to cast, because it's your world and you get to design it. Whoa, Steven. Hey, buddy. Hey. How come? You just went through all this stuff about spells, and I didn't hear anything about rolling them bones. I got all these bones, and I want to roll them. I'm talking about dice. I want to roll them bones. Well, most spells don't require the caster to roll. Sorry. The exception is spell attacks, for which you roll a d20, you add your spellcasting modifier, and you add your proficiency bonus. It's like a skill check for spells. So your spellcasting modifier is determined by your class. We'll talk about that with classes. But you're always proficient with spells you're casting, and you just got to roll a d20, add the modifier, and add the proficiency bonus. Sometimes, actually kind of a lot, often, very often, spells make their targets save against them. So if somebody casts a spell on you, you get one chance to try to avoid or mitigate its effects. The spell save, if you're the spellcaster, your spell save is always the same. It's 8 plus your spellcasting modifier plus your proficiency. So if you have a spellcasting modifier of 3, like if you're a sorcerer and you have a charisma of +3, and your proficiency bonus is +2, then you would have 8 plus 3, so that's 11, plus 2, so that's 13. So your total would be 13. Why is it 8 instead of 10? Most of the time in Dungeons & Dragons, the default is 10. So how come this is 8? It's because proficiency starts at 2, at +2. So the way they're like resetting the normal, quote unquote, like citizen caster to 10 is they're making it 8. So if you have a +0 in your spellcasting modifier, it will be 8 plus 0 plus 2, which is 10. Math. All right. Now, I did not cover some of the more nitty-gritty technical parts of spellcasting because I'm going to cover them right now. These are 3 things that I think will come up enough that you really got to know them. Whether you're casting or at a table with a caster or running a table for a caster, these are things that will be invaluable for you. They come up a lot. They're really fiddly, so let's get into them. Spells that have bonus action casting times. So, if you remember the combat chapter, every turn of combat, you have a movement, which you can move up to your speed. You've got an action to do whatever, usually casting a spell. You've got a bonus action for whatever if something costs a bonus action. And once per round outside of your turn, you have a reaction. So, just for bonus action spells, if you cast a spell with your bonus action, you can't also cast a level spell, for your action. See, this is the difference. You can still cast a cantrip with your action. And you can still cast any kind of spell with your reaction. We don't care about the reaction. But if you cast a spell with your bonus action, then you can't cast a level spell for your action. So basically, the idea is that you can't cast 2 level spells in a turn. This does make the action economy a little bit harder for casters. It's a little bit weirder the first time you cast a bonus action spell, but it's still worth it to have a bonus action spell because usually they will only have a bonus action upkeep and maybe no concentration. Hey, I'm looking at you again, Spiritual Weapon. God, I love that spell. Anyway, The second fiddly bit is combined effects. So there are a lot of spells that give bonuses to abilities or bonuses to skills or things like that. And effects from spells with different names combine. They stack. If you get +2 strength from one spell called Gym Spell, and then you get +2 strength from another spell called Pargendorfin's Incredible Wonder Spell, then you'll get +4 strength. 2 + 2, no problem. But if somebody casts Pargendorfin's Wonder Spell on you twice, even if 2 different casters cast it, you don't get +4. You just get +2. You only get the effect once from that spell because it was the same spell. So a real example, to not get weirdly caught up in my own name, is like if 2 different clerics cast Bless on a fighter, the fighter only gets the benefit of 1 Bless. They do get the higher of the 2. If one of them sort of like used a higher spell slot, they can use that Bless instead of the other one. Otherwise, just go by the most recent. That will not come up very often, but combined effects is important to know. You can combine effects from spells with different names. You can't combine effects from spells with the same name. And I know what you're thinking, and don't worry, Prestidigitation makes a special note that it does stack with itself. You can combine its effects with itself, which means Hugh using it to make that bar in black hollow scary is 100,000% allowed, and there are no further questions. Thank you! The final fiddly bit is casting spells as a ritual. This is a cool thing. It is, unlike the other 2 things I brought up, it's only going to help you. Some spells have a ritual tag. It'll be like an R in a box. Some of them will just say ritual. You need a spell with that tag to cast a spell as a ritual. You can cast a spell as a ritual. The difference is that it takes 10 minutes to cast instead of its usual casting time, but you don't have to spend a spell slot. What? That's right. You don't have to spend a spell slot. Now, again, the spell has to say that it can be cast as a ritual, so you can't just do this willy-nilly, and your character must have the ritual casting class feature. So not all spellcasters can cast rituals. So check if your spellcasting class has the ritual casting feature. And the final little fiddly bit about this is a lot of spells will say if you cast this at a level higher than its usual level, then you get this bonus. You can't cast at a higher level as a ritual. Since you're not using a spell slot, casting as a ritual basically pretends that you're casting with the spell slot that the spell costs naturally. So if it's a level 3 spell, it's considered that it's used a level 3 slot, even though it really didn't. You can't hype it up. So those are the only real technical fiddly bits, and that is spellcasting.
Oh God, I love that bit. Wow, late night is fun, and being the host of a late night show is fun, and that's why I love being here with you all on Spell Spotlight every Saturday from 1:15 a.m. to 2:15 a.m. on the TV channel. But of course, it wouldn't be Spell Spotlight without a spell, and we have a very special spell for you all today. Coming to us all the way from the back of the basic rules, it's Mage Hand!
Hello.
Mage Hand, welcome to the show. Great to have you on.
I am happy to be here, and we only have 1 minute before I disappear, so...
Well, let's get to it then. You're here about your new book, The Other Hand. Great book. I loved it. What is it about? I did read it, but what is it about?
The Other Hand, yes, it is about being a lonely hand. If you cast me, then you cannot cast me again. So I am, as you see, a left hand, and I have never met the right hand for me, so...
Wow. There's a whole book of that.
Oui, yes. It is mostly on Wii, but soon it will also be on Switch, so...
Well, it sounds like a sad life, but exciting at least. So you must get in combat a lot.
Oh, no.
No?
You cannot attack with me. I am not a fighter.
Oh, a lover, not a fighter.
Yes, I am not for the fighting. I do things, I hold things for pleasure, so...
Sorry, what are you talking about?
This is wrong. I've said this wrong. This is pleasure for to please. I'm a hand for pleasure. No?
Okay, can we say this on the air? What is he talking about? Kevin? Sorry, I'm talking to my producer. Kevin, can we say this on the... Whoa! Okay, he is gone. Well, That's convenient. And that's all the time we have. So check out The Other Hand by Mage Hand, now available on Wii. Cut to commercial. Are we off air? Can I just say I hate these guests? Can somebody book me a guest with duration? You know, something substantial to contribute to the conversation? Who booked Mage Hand? Who booked Mage Hand? Kevin, you booked Mage Hand? Be honest with me. Did you book Mage Hand? I am probably the only woman on late night, and we have a lot of eyes on us. Was this scrutiny to the highest degree? So oh, you thought you booked Mage Armor. Well, I thought we booked Mage Armor also, and I did all my research on Mage Armor. We're, what? We're live? We're live. Hi. And it's good night, everybody. Good night.
And that brings us to the end of another thrilling episode of Second Best University, the only D&D reading companion podcast, as far as I'm aware. We did it. Now we've covered so many of the basics. I know that we're reading the basic rules right now, but I can't tell you how strong the foundation is for moving into other spaces. Really soon we're going to get into the things that are really exciting to players about D&D, such as, classes, races, my thoughts about them. Trust me, I have a lot of spicy takes about those kind of things. But we gotta get the firm foundation first. Now we know how spells work. Gosh, it's going great. Got a little bit of late night talk show host Allie Gordon in there, which is always a delight. If you're listening and you want to keep reading, boy, do I feel ya. I fully understand. I love to read. Keep reading if you want to. I gotta tell you, after this chapter, it's mostly lists of spells, which might be more exciting to you now than they were 20 minutes ago, but are still probably pretty dry. So if you want something more exciting, and now you're in a spellcasting mood, I gotta recommend Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. It's a little old, as books go. As books go, actually, it's pretty young. But as people go, it's getting, it's not as pop culture-y, but it is also really dry. It's written in the style of a history, and it is so incredible that it manages to still be a super fun story. I cannot recommend it enough. It's one of those books where the first 50 pages, you're like, why did someone recommend this book to me? And the last 50 pages, you're like, how is this not required reading? This is incredible. So really highly recommend it. That's all for this episode. So thank you so much and happy reading. Second Best You is created by Stephen Buckley and is produced by Stephen Buckley and Marty Scanlon. All music is by Marty Scanlon. Second Best is produced by Stephen Kelly and Marty Scanlon. You can follow us on Twitter at SecondBestU or SecondBestDND. And you can check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/secondbestdnd. Thanks!